in my veins, blue in one eye, red, white, and blue in my brain. I'm Bulldog born, Bulldog, that's my breed. I was born to follow where the Bulldogs lead.
Ladies and gentlemen, our VIP guest today is an absolute icon. He's a VFL and AFL kingpin. And Carlton legend David Parkin describes him as the most competent and incredible administrator he's ever seen. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Inside the Kennel, Shane O'Sullivan.
Thanks a lot. A very lively introduction. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we're stoked to have you, Shane. And I wanted to start by saying that it was well written in the 80s that the Bulldogs were probably within 3 years of extinction when you came along in 1983. This episode, we're hoping to dedicate to trying to prove or investigate your role in reinventing the club. And if the words of David Parkin weren't enough, former Bulldog and Sydney Swans player Neil Cordy said himself that you, Shane O'Sullivan, is the man responsible for changing the course of Bulldog history. That's a bold claim. How does a statement like that sit with you?
Well, I really appreciate Neil's words. It was certainly an interesting time going from the premiership team in '82 to the team that was on the bottom to start in '83. But so many good people, were there. Not only just me to make it happen, but a lot of really dedicated people. And I feel that we certainly did sort of get the place going again, that's for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we're looking forward to investigating that, but I want to take you right back to the beginning, Shane, if that's okay. You're a boy from Bunyip out there in Gippsland. Tell me how your love affair for footy began.
Oh, gosh, I suppose, when you got 5 brothers, all keen, and in those days you played footy and cricket, and if you played tennis, we all thought there was something wrong with those people because, but now you probably wish you had a game. But no, just in the country, footy was the big part of the town. And, gosh, I can remember my brother Gary and I, when the season finished, one year we lived sort of on what we called the hill side of Bunyip, and we organised a hills and flats game. Just to keep the season going, and we actually even organised a girls' game the same day. So that goes back a long way. But like every night we'd be out kicking the footy, and it was just a great sort of way to grow up. If I had my time again, I wouldn't change a thing, except our dad passed away pretty young. But apart from that, it was just a great place to grow up. Great sporting people, and most enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that you're a Collingwood supporter growing up. I imagine, like any country kid, you would have had ambitions to make it to the big league. Was that a driving force of you growing up?
Oh gosh, yes. Those days I could have told you probably definitely every Collingwood player's number, but probably every player in the VFL in those days, because as soon as Saturday footy finished, you'd go with Dad down to the station, and you get the Herald Sun, the Sporting Globe, and you'd watch the footy show that Saturday night as well, and you just couldn't get enough of it. So it was just always thought I was going to be a VFL player, but got the next best thing and being able to work in it. So.
Beautiful. Well, look, I'd like to investigate a little bit your footy career growing up. So I understand in 1978-9 you went down to Punt Road, you went down to Richmond,
yep.
And you had an opportunity to try out down there. You were a 4-time best and fairest winner in different leagues as well. Yep. So you could play as a 171 centimetre. You were small, but you could obviously pack a punch. So tell us about your time down at Richmond and how close you came to securing a spot.
Well, I was probably lucky enough. A good friend of mine, Max Scales, who was involved at Cooperoo in Queensland when I had a little stint up there, and also I knew Kevin Sheedy and Alan Swab. So Paddy Ganane, after a year at Caulfield in the VFA, asked me to come down and have a run at the Tigers, and that was a real eye opener to train in those days. Tony Jewell and those guys. Boy, training was pretty tough. You just went for hours, but a real thrill. I can remember we were playing a practice match, the Richmond amongst themselves down at Morty Alec, I think it was, and Kevin Sheedy and I, great friends, were in each other's weddings. And anyway, Sheeds was late getting to the game. So they said, you're starting on the bench. Anyway, he said to me, when I get on the ground, I'm the first bloke I'm going to whack is in trouble. Anyway, half time, they read the team out. And who's on Sheeds? Me. And I leaned over and said, mate, you're not going to hit me, hey? He said, no. So a nice little brawl started with Clokey. So, but yeah, lucky enough to get a game and a practice match in those days on the MCG, which, you never get sick, even not playing, you never get sick of walking on the MCG. But yeah, look, it was a Form 4 in those days. You only have 2, and I'd been interstate for something like 5 or 6 years. So that Rob Wiley, I think, was a much better pick than wasting one on me. But I've had a great time, and probably through having a run there and get to know Alan Swab certainly helped me get into football administration.
Yeah, well, Rob Wiley played 113 games and he went on to be a premiership player, didn't he? So maybe a savvy pick, but I understand he kicked 5 goals in one of the practice matches, so you couldn't have done more, surely.
Gee whiz, you've done your research. Yeah, I can. It was quite funny because my now wife, we were just going together, and she, so after the game, she said, "Oh, you can actually play a bit, So, yeah, no, I could probably take you to those 5 spots and show you exactly where I kicked them from. It was, something that at least I've a great memory I've got. But yeah, no, it was a great opportunity. And as I say, probably just that sort of experience, getting to know some people in the VFL, certainly helped me get where I am today.
Yeah, well, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Kevin Bartlett. You obviously spoke about Mickey Malthouse there
Yep.
as well. We're going to talk and investigate your relationship with Mick,
Yep.
no doubt. So here you are. You're no contract as a player, so you're basically a footy orphan. But suddenly a position emerges or materialises at Carlton,
Yep.
and it's a promotions and footy operations role.
Yep.
You seem perfect for it, and you take the job. It's a golden era at the club. And take us inside. So you're in your mid-20s, and suddenly this position at one of the premier clubs in the league opens. How was it for you?
Oh, I still sort of pinch myself, but I actually applied for the job originally and missed out. And one of the Carlton ex-players, Greg Kennedy, full forward, got the job. And he was a carpet layer originally. Anyway, a few months later, I get a call to say, would you still be interested in the job? Greg's decided to go back to carpet laying, which for the life of me, I don't know about punching your knee into the side of the carpet to get it up to the corners. I don't think that'd be something I'd enjoy doing. But yeah, and they said to me, when could you start? And I said, look, I'll be there tomorrow. So yeah, very lucky to sort of get in. And as I say, it was probably because of knowing Alan Swab and those sort of people recommended me as well, and Sheeds and those sort of people. So I can remember walking in the first day and standing in the race was Wes Loss. I think it was about round 2 or 3. We're playing Geelong here at home at Carlton, and I was pretty nervous that particular day to sort of to walk in and start a football administration career.
Oh, I imagine so. And the footy that you were sort of privy to at that time, you've got the likes of Jezelenko and Harms and Dool and Johnson, Fitzpatrick, Southby, all of these, icons of the game. How was it, having a front row seat to that show?
Oh, look, I was still, I think every time Alex walked into my office, I was sort of stage frightened to speak, waiting for him to start the conversation. But look, I think that one of the lucky things for me at the time was that I was playing, VFA footy on a Sunday and VFL Saturday, and a lot of the boys had come and watch. So they sort of at least knew you could play a bit, and it sort of helped when you're in conversations with them. And I was just lucky too, like, the Jeff Southby's, Dools, Mackay's, Ashman's, like so many, Mark McClure, so many really just good blokes. And, they sort of made me feel really welcome straight away. So, after a couple of weeks, it felt like, I'd been here for a long time. And to be here, in my first year and they win a flag, I must admit, I pinched myself, and I was probably a bit lucky because most of those players, had been recruited before I got here. But when I look back to what footy is now, like in those days, there was the general manager, a finance guy, a lady in the office, and me, and that was football. That was the football department. So we're now, gosh, I can't count how many people involved in footy now. It's incredible.
Amazing. And, just in your first year, as you say, to win a premiership, it's against your old team, the team you followed as a kid. So, I could imagine the emotions sort of sitting there, particularly when Harms parries that ball back into the road of Sheldon. What a game.
Well, it was, and I must admit, at halftime, I'm thinking, the Pies are in front, and I'm thinking, oh my God, all these years I've barracked for this mob, and they're going to get one now. But it was, the famous Blues, Mighty Blues. They got up, and I must admit, for a person who wasn't really a drinker, I certainly celebrated with everyone, well and truly. And I think one of the great memories I've got of that particular day. After the game, we had the function at the Hilton, which is the on the corner there, Wellington Parade, and it's the Pullman now. But Alex Jezelenko, everyone's going into the function, into the room, and Jezza grabs me and says, "Come on, we'll go and have a drink at the bar and talk about the game." Well, gee whiz, like,
Wow.
from a young bloke from Gippsland to an icon wanting to have a chat about the game, I was pretty stoked, and memories that you never forget.
Oh, what an amazing thing that is. So we've got a lot of Collingwood and Carlton supporters watching this as well. Was that, we'd love to know, was that ball in or out?
Well, Harmsy always says it was about 6 or 8 rows, but I think the thing that people forget, he actually kicked it himself and he chased it. So it was an amazing effort to sort of get there and put it back into play, sort of thing. So, but these days the camera would have so many different angles. There'd certainly be know if it was or it wasn't.
Yeah, we need a drone. We need a drone to check
That's
that
it.
out. All right. Still inconclusive.
Yeah.
All right. Your eye turned to recruitment, didn't it? Not long after. And there was a ginger-haired South Australian person that caught your eye by the name of Phil Malin. I understand that you went over to South Australia to watch him in an elimination final. And
Yep.
Phil himself tells me that you were running late that day and you instructed the cabbie to put the radio on to hear the start of the game. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. I was at an underage game at Norwood, and so I once that game was finished, I shot across the footy park, and I think when I walked in, I'm scanning the ground trying to find Phil, and I realised he was the one getting carted off on a stretcher. So, but it certainly didn't deter me. He was someone that we're keen to get, and it was incredible when he did come across for a practice match the next year. I think he went to St Kilda the week before and then come to here. And, we played out in the number 1 oval outside here in a practice match. And he went in to meet Wes Loss and all that after the game. And I think he even signed virtually straight away. So Wes said, "I don't know what you guys spoke about beforehand, but we're pretty happy to get him." And I always remember Phil, his first game with us, he said to me, because he was still in South Australia and flew in, and we didn't pick him at the time. And in those days, you could get away with a bit of that. And he said to me, "Where am I playing?" And I said, this is Perth Jones in 1980. And I said, "Hasn't Perth told you?" He said, "No." So I went to Perth, and this is the day. This is the better, half an hour before they run out. Said to Percy, "You haven't told Phil where he's playing." And he said, "No, you tell him. You tell him." So I said, "Phil, you're on the wing, mate." So, so got a lot of good memories with the Shark. He was a great man.
Yeah, fantastic. And we know, your relationship with the Shark continued because we'll talk about 1985 a little bit
Yeah.
later when he's transferred to the Doggies. Wonderful, wonderful. So here's the end of 1982. You've played in 3 out of the last 4 premierships. Incredible. So nobody surely in their right mind is going to be leaving Carlton at that point, particularly not to go to the Wooden Spooners. But you did the unthinkable and you left. So I understand that you had an association with President Tony Capes at the time and the Under 18 Teal Cup and Slug Jordan. How did your transfer come about?
Well, Tony, such a great man, great president. I got to say, one of the greatest people I've ever been involved with at footy. He just had a beautiful knack to how to handle everything, and kept at me and at me. And anyway, involvement with the Teal Cup, got to know each other really well, and he just kept at me and at me. And I thought to myself, well, you knock on the door representing Carlton, and people are happy to sign, and I thought to myself, well, you got to test yourself. And so I thought, well, just got to give it a go. If it doesn't work, I'm still young enough, hopefully, to still get back in somewhere if it didn't work. But so it was a big step. But it was hard telling David Parkin and Wes Loss and these people that I was leaving after 4 amazing years. But I remember the Bulldogs played Carlton in a first practice match in '83 up at Traralgon, and they absolutely pumped us, And Wes Loss was heard to say in the coach's box, because you could hear everything next door, said that we told the little fella he was silly to leave.
Well, Dr. Tony Capes said that we described you as the best recruit that the club had had since Teddy Whitten at the time, because he really credited you with bringing in some big names. But I imagine when you first arrived there, you've spoken about obviously the Carlton practice match. But that off season, we'd lost Kelvin Templeton, our Brownlow medalist and Coleman medalist. Mocker Dunstan, who'd won 3 out of 4 best and fairest in a row, but also Teddy Whitten Jr. Did his knee, didn't he, in that exhibition match for Ash Wednesday? So I guess it wasn't the greatest start. Did you have some doubts that you'd made the right decision?
I must admit, the first week, I thought I sat in my office, and I'll be totally honest, I bawled my eyes out, thinking, "What in the hell have I done here?"
Wow.
I went and met Kelvin. He at least gave me the time of day, but I walked away knowing that he wasn't going to change his mind. I never got the chance to meet, catch up with Mocker. He didn't really want to catch up. And one that that didn't leave, but Dougie Hawkins, Sheeds was into Dougie big time, and he was hard to find, hard to track down. So thank goodness that didn't happen. But like that, once those sort of things happening, and I just thought, what have I done? Crazy stuff. But look, you just get yourself together, and I was determined to get good people in good positions at the club, and try to recruit players from interstate that were premiership players that had success, to show some of these young fellas, that at the Bulldogs at the time, how to go about everything. So first week, bit of a shock, and then you sort of get yourself up and about, and away you go.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Well, Lou Richards at the time described your departure as like leaving the Queen Mary job there and jumping on a rowboat in the Maribyrnong. And I guess it would have sort of felt like that. But your own wife said that you were a workaholic. You were working 16 hours a day at that time, in her own words. So I imagine you did have some work to be done. What were your first priorities?
Well, it was certainly, as I said, to try to get some good people in positions that could help. Certainly to get the culture and everything turned around, and also just as I said, go to recruit players from interstate clubs to that was successful. And the other thing, I suppose, was we probably Moneyball's a word that gets thrown around now. Well, I reckon we actually started that in lots of ways, getting people like Mark Kellett and Bruce Duperuzal and some of those players, from other VFL clubs at the time, that we felt that could really sort of help and sort of make us a lot stronger and build our depth. So, and I suppose also, a tough thing, and probably a little bit inexperienced at the time, I thought, I was worried about the coach at the time, and Bluey Hampshire, who's just was an outstanding person, and no problems there. But I was just we had quite good facilities, believe it or not, for those times, and we had some good people around, and they just weren't getting used. And I just wasn't sure that. I suppose coming from David Parkin, who was, with all due respect, the ultimate at the time coach and professional, things just weren't sort of the way that I was used to. So that was something we looked at, and unfortunately, my inexperience probably, didn't handle it as well as I should have.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll get to that, no doubt. But I want to talk about some of the big scalps that you sort of claimed early on. So you talked about Moneyball. You need money to be able to entice, and I understand because we finished bottom, Wooden Spooners in '82. We had the first pick in the 1983 pre-season, and St Kilda had number 2. Collingwood had number 3.
Yep.
I understand there was some gamesmanship or some ducks and drakes that you played in order to poach our number 1 and also gain some cash. Can you tell us that story, Shane?
Well, it's interesting. Young Gary Shaw, Collingwood were really keen on him, but our preference and we wanted was Andrew Purser, who become a really great Footscray player and just outstanding ruckman for us. We had no intentions of taking Gary, but excuse me, Collingwood rang me and to see if they could entice us not to take Gary. Well, I certainly wasn't telling them that we weren't going to take him anyway. And they offered us a sum of money. And I said, look, I'll have to get back to you. So I remember ringing Tony Capes and Wayne Walsh, who was chairman of selectors, and that. I said, look, Collingwood have offered this X amount of money for us not to pick Gary Shaw. And I said, look, I reckon we can get a bit more out of them than what they're offering. So I left it for a day sort of thing. Don't want to rush straight back in. And I said, look, we're happy to do it, but it's for this sort of figure. And they said, yes, not a problem. And I think St Kilda, when they found out what we got, I remember Ian Stewart ringing me up and calling me a lot of terrible names over the phone for what we got to what the Saints got. But we had no intentions of taking Gary, but certainly Andrew was the number 1 man who we wanted. And as I said, he was really outstanding for us. And the way he trained, the way he put in every week, unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I've heard the figures that you were able to extract there, Shane, and you certainly amplified it. And I guess Gary Shaw was no slouch as a player himself, but Andrew Purser probably played quadruple the amount of games and best and fairest winner. So what a haul, plus getting the cash. And with that cash, I guess you were able to sort of speak to a number of players. I know that you went across to WA and you spoke to Jimmy Sewell.
Yep.
And Ian Williams. Can you talk about how you were able to lure those 2 stars?
Well, Jimmy was actually on Geelong's books at the time, and his Form 4 had expired, and I was with a great guy, president of Claremont, Wally Maskell, and deep down was probably a Carlton man as well, but because I got to know him over the 4 years, he certainly was a guy that I could go and talk to, and just happened to say, I hear that Geelong have not going on with Jimmy Sewell. So I said, you wouldn't happen to know where he works, do you?
Wow.
And he was actually running in partnership with Brian Peake, running squash courts. And anyway, went around and saw Jim and was lucky enough to convince him to have a look at the Bulldogs. And he ended up coming across and, he was another one, like they'd been at a good club and they just knew how to train and all that. And Ian Williams or Gary Merrington and some of the recruiters had a lot to do with, getting Willow to the club. And he was another one who come from, a good team in Swan Districts at the time. So, look, it was, you talk about the money and that, but if you speak to Stephen Smith, he probably, pulled his hair out when I was around. I probably caused a lot of issues for him. I think I stopped him resigning about 10 times on me because I'm sort of a bit of a dreamer. I always think things will fall into place, and most of the time they did.
Now, there's a couple of other scalps. You weren't done there, were you? Because there was a young man at left footer from Fitzroy who was barely getting a game. He'd only played 7 games, Peter Foster. And
Yep.
you lured him across and had a look at him in a practice match. He snagged 10 in a reserve pracky, and you signed him up as well. How was Fozzie at first sight?
Well, he's a unique character, Fozzie. I tell you, he just one of those players that when he went back to centre half back, just was perfect for him really. And he played so many great games for us in my time there. But he was a character. I can remember one day he was always a little bit late sometimes and pretty casual. And I was standing at the race and I was just about to give him a spray. He said, "Don't say anything. Don't say anything." So I twigged that he wasn't happy that I was going to say something. But yeah, the way he played at Footscray compared to Fitzroy. And I think when you get some of these guys and they feel comfortable and in the environment and they know they're a chance to play nearly every week, it certainly sort of helped him relax. And yeah, he was a big part of why we had a great year in '85 for sure.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So there's a quartet of stars that you've brought in, but there was still more. There was a young Indigenous boy, teenager from Northern Territory who you brought down. And I spoke with Magic McLean on the phone just the other day, and he said, Shane O'Sullivan actually offered me the number 3 Guernsey. And he didn't really know the history of the club. So he said, no, Shane, I'm going to forge my own path. And he ended up taking the number 51. But later, once he understood the history, he thought, damn it, I could have had EJ's number. But it wasn't to be. Tell us a little bit about getting Mickey Magic McLean down to the club.
Well, to go back a little bit further, I can remember Carnival. I think it might have been under 16s up in the Northern Territory. And I was at Carlton at the time, and I actually gave Mick a Carlton jumper because he was, just loved the way he played and things like that. But
Wow.
but I think, to be honest, I've got to give credit to Gary Merrington and those sort of guys that were a big part of getting Mick to the club. But you're right. Like I did offer him, I said, I can still see where I was walking up the stairs in the office and said to Mick, mate, would you like to change numbers to number 3 or something like that? And he said, hey, bro, they all going to remember 51. But also when Mick come out of contract, I can remember his mum and dad had moved up to Cairns, and I went up to re-sign him. And I can remember, hiring a car and seemed driving for a long way. And I felt like I'd come to the end of Australia just about. There was nowhere else to go. I'd missed the turnoff. Anyway, got back and found the house, and I can remember sitting down with Michael and his mum and dad, and I think there was something like 14 people around the table, and the only person who didn't speak was Michael. So he was a pretty quiet young fella, but mum and dad were great, and we ended up doing a deal, and he was tragically at times the injuries he got because he was a phenomenal player for Footscray and then for the Bears as well, but just one of the really great guys that you meet in football, and his wife, Linda. So good to sort of be in part of Mick's life there for some time.
He's a Hall of Famer at Brisbane. Hopefully he gets the same accolade at the Doggies one day because he was, truly magic, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
And I was talking to Alistair Ford actually recently, and he said that on day one they were training down at the bottom of the Vic Uni ground down there, and you brought Mick for his first training session, and you were looking around for someone to sort of partner him with, and Alistair being sort of a young country lad, you sort of introduced him and said, "This is Michael McLean. Can you look after him?" And so clearly you've got good instincts because they're still great mates today.
Yeah. Well, he was a young, quite sort of young fella, Alistair, from up Bairnsdale way, and left footer. Such a big boy too. Good young fella, and like Mick is such a good fella. He mixes in with everyone, and I think it probably helped both of them at the time feel a bit more comfortable. A couple of new boys at the time, and if they can, still great friends now, that really makes you feel good about everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, we haven't even got to the '83 season because your work still kept going. Stevie Wallace came through. Obviously, Brian Royal, who was on our radar for a long time, finally got to the club after his knee injury as well. We missed one there, which was Tommy Alvin. So he was a premiership teammate of Choco's down at Bairnsdale as well.
Yep.
How was it that he didn't come to the Dogs?
Oh, that was that was disappointing. Gosh, we even put a special function after a game at my place and had all the players and their partners and come to our place, and we had Tommy and his partner, now wife, and come along just to sort of show that how keen we were and what a good club you're going to join and all that. And he was great, good friends with Brian Royal and that as well from Bairnsdale. And time went on, and I can remember saying to my brother Gary, who was looking after our country zone, and Gary Merrington, I said, I can smell a rat here somewhere. Something's not right, that Tommy won't sort of, give us an answer. And I said to him, look, you got to get down there and have a good chat and, just sort of see what's going on. Well, he ended up saying that the rules were a bit lax at those times. And Ian Collins had obviously been into his ear as well. So he decided to go to the Blues. But the only, I suppose, thing that helped us or whatever was the $70,000 transfer fee. Certainly sort of helped a lot at the time, but it was still disappointing to miss someone like Tom, who would have just added to our side at the time. It would have even made us stronger. But look, you not always going to get everyone that you want, but certainly Brian Royal and that tried pretty hard to help, but felt it was nearly a waste of time putting a special show on for Tommy. But I must admit we had a lot of good times together, all the players and their partners and that. So it was certainly a good spirit around the place anyway.
Yeah, wonderful. And they're the sliding door moments. You can't get them all, but it opens opportunities for others, as we've sort of said. So, we mentioned there were 10 players in 1983 round one that debuted for the Dogs in dog colours. So you certainly put the pieces together for a changing of the guard and a new revolution of doggy times. We lost the first match. But against your old team Carlton in round two, having been obliterated, as you mentioned in the practice match, we came out all guns blazing. You wouldn't have expected that. How on earth? What was that feeling like of getting over the Navy Blues? And we trailed by about 5 goals in the first quarter as well.
Yep.
So wow, what a switch flicker.
Well, look, I'll just go back to that first game out at Waverley. We played Geelong, and we certainly sort of had some moments, but I can remember, and a part of, I thought, what in the hell is this club all about? Stephen Lunn was stood, or Big Blakey got a free kick, and Stephen Lunn got down on his fours, and Blakey fell backwards over him, and we got a 15-metre penalty, and of course he kicked the goal, and I thought, my God, this is kindergarten stuff. Anyway, we regrouped, and look, Whitten Oval was pretty special ground for home ground advantage in those days. And I must admit, when we're 5 goals down against the Blues, the round two, I thought, oh, here we go again, like the Traralgon game. But we certainly come good. And if I can just touch back on Brian Royal and Steve Wallace, what great young fellas and acquisitions they were. And I think you got to give a couple of those boys credit too, that Brian had a pretty bad knee, and I can remember Tony Cape saying to me, look, when you're contracting, just offer him the bare minimum. Anyway, after that first practice match, I said to Tony Capes, I said, this bloke's a pretty good player. In fact, Steve Wallace and Brian, I think we changed their contract 3 times in 1 year because, as I said, the rules were pretty lax, and really didn't want to ever lose them. So we tried to reward them as best we could for what we could at the time. And that Carlton game was fantastic. I must admit, I've been lucky to be involved in some great wins, but it's one of my favourites, I must admit. And you wouldn't believe it, Stephen Goff, who took my role at Carlton, invited Carol and I to a Carlton function that night. And I did a Perce Jones, who was always coming late, so everyone had noticed him. So I said, we're going to be last to get there because I want everyone to, I was very happy fella, and to walk in there, and I wasn't carrying on stupid, but it was a good feeling after the way we played up in Traralgon to turn the tables, and one of the great wins.
Yeah, well, I imagine you would have gone past the table of Wes Lofts and just said, maybe I'm not regretting it after all.
Exactly.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And, the ball kept rolling that year, didn't it? Because even in round 3, we ended up beating, a Melbourne team that had acquired Calvin Templeton. Then we beat Hawthorn in round 4, who then went on to become the 1983 Premiership team. And then we beat the Tigers and absolutely obliterated them. I think Jock Edmund probably kicked 5 goals in the first 15 minutes of that game. So what an explosive start. Were you just sitting back thinking, oh my God, we're a chance here?
Oh, 100%. It was, I thought to myself that from that first week where I was sort of, unbelievably disappointed and a few tears and things like that, to thinking, gosh, we're a good chance. But, it was just terrific to it was probably more for me just to see the enjoyment of the Footscray supporters. Sorry to keep calling them Footscray, but that's to me what they are. And when I was there, and to see the joy on their faces and things like that was just worth gold, really. It was great, and I think you've probably got better history there. Me and my memory's fading, but I think it nearly got down to the last game that year whether we sort of made the final or not. And I can remember Stephen Nash's brother Neville was the umpire. I think Collingwood or Wait, I just forget now. But anyway, a couple of decisions went against us, and we certainly were sort of not happy with him after the game. But I thought it laid at least the foundations, for the next couple of years anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were dubbed the evil genius at the time by the press because you were just helping with your knowledge, obviously, of Carlton and then Hawthorn through Parkin. So we were able to overcome some of those, big scalps. And I think we won 10 games that year, which was 7 more than the previous year.
Yeah.
So you must have been pretty satisfied moving forward.
Oh, as I said, it was not so much for myself or the people that we got into the club, but more for the Footscray supporters, who deserved to sort of have success. And we had a terrific, group, like, as we said, Tony Capes and some of the board members, hadn't sort of had that sort of winning feeling for a long time. So it was a whole sort of gamut, that was just enjoyable, and sat back with a lot of pride at the end of the season.
Wow, I bet you did. Well, you didn't quite sit back because you went off to New Caledonia, didn't you, with the team on the end of season trip? And I understand a man that you just mentioned, Stephen Lunn, was involved in a bit of a joyride. Is there anything at all you could share from that?
Oh gosh, you just pack, you settle, and put your bag in the door, and all of a sudden there's drama. But it was probably it was one of those things that you sort of certainly don't plan for. And Lunny was, as I said, a bit of a character what he did that Geelong game, but a real sort of live wire, and happened to borrow the little car from the front door and drove down the wrong way, and unfortunately 3 other young boys jumped in with him. But I suppose the worst part was Stephen was put in confinement for about 4 or 5 days. So my main job was going down to make sure he was all right every day. So, but yeah, look, these things happen, and luckily it didn't sort of create the drama that it would have these days.
Well done. Got him out of jail. And a shout out to Gary Walpole as well, who I believe was involved, and a couple of Bulldog Gippsland boys who shall remain nameless. So here we are. We're on the eve of the 1984 season, and a lot is about to unfold. We did have Strawberry Steve O'Dwyer zoned to the club at that point. Can you tell us what happened there? Because I understand there was a deal done, and we ended up with Lully Bambler.
Yeah, Ray Snedden, who was the CEO of GM of Melbourne at the time, rang me to see if if we'd look at trading Steve O'Dwyer, and we could pick up Lally Bamblett. And I said, look, I'll get back to you. And I went and saw Gary Merrington and Stephen Nash, and spoke to Wayne Walsh and that as well. And Gary and that weren't big raps on young Steve, even though he's a big fella, because we felt we had, with Andrew Purser and that sort of thing. But we were pretty keen to get Lally Bamblett. So I can remember I rang Ray Steadden back and said, look, we're prepared to do the deal. And he said, there's only one problem. He's in Western Australia. And I think at the time, the clearances were about to close, or there was a time frame. I think I had 48 hours to sort of. So I remember jumping on the plane, and I ended up finding him he was playing at Claremont, or going to play at Claremont. And I found him in a caravan park with his partner at the time on the other side of Perth, out Joondalup up West Perth way, which was horrific compared to, to get across to Claremont. Anyway, I can remember knocking on the caravan door, and his partner opened the door, and I said, oh, could I speak to Lally? I'm from Footscray Footy Club and all that. Anyway, let me in, and I said, look, how would you like to come and play at the Bulldogs? And Lally's partner said, let's go now. So I thought, this is not going to be too hard. So we went and had some lunch, and he agreed to come. And what a terrific player he was. Like, gosh, he was one of the most exciting players I've seen. Him and Simon Beasley were amazing together. Chalk and cheese of everything, but just knew how to play together. And Les, he didn't like all the running, but once the footies come out, he was exceptional, and made a big difference to the club, that's for sure.
Oh, what an acquisition. I think they kicked 156 goals between them, Simon and Lally, in 85. So what a duo that is. Unbelievable. You just had a knack, didn't you, Shane, of finding gems. Mickey Fruitcake Ford was another one from Bairnsdale. He'd only played 1 year of Aussie rules footy when you poached him and brought him across to the Kennel. And obviously he had ties with Alistair Ford, and also he was also a cousin of Brian Royal too. So you had some Bulldog connection there, but well done for unearthing another star in Mickey. But possibly you got an even bigger recruit over that summer, possibly the biggest of all time. Your old mate from Richmond, Mickey Malthouse. Can you tell us how Bluey Hampshire's resignation 12 weeks before the 84 season unfolded, and you were able to put in place, possibly one of the biggest pieces to the puzzle?
Well, as I said, I sort of felt that Ian wasn't the person to perhaps coach the Bulldogs long term. But with Mick, when I trained at Richmond, Mick and Neil Baum were just terrific to the guys that were trying out. And sometimes something just stays in the back of your head, it's the way people are and that sort of thing. And when Bluey decided to resign, I must admit, I did drive down to his place to make sure that he felt he was doing the right thing, because I just didn't want to sort of leave it sort of, in a bad taste, even though it was probably, hard for him. But he obviously saw the writing on the wall. And it's true, we did interview, Bobby Skiltman. I even went and spoke to Mike Fitzpatrick as well. And I can remember going to Michael's place, and he had an attic, and he pulled the ladder down, went up the attic, and got all David Parkins in retrospects about the Bulldogs to see what Parko thought and things like that. So anyway, Michael sort of wasn't what he wanted to do. He was making probably too much money anyway, and spoke to Barras and John Kennedy and people like that. But I can remember speaking to Mick afterwards that he was down, I think, at Cape Patterson at the beach, and with the kids on the beach, and had the radio going, or the transistor or whatever in those days, and heard that Bluey Hampshire had resigned. And he said to Nanette, pack the kids up, let's go back. Hopefully we might get a call. So, certainly, Mick was the one we wanted, particularly after, trying to get him the year before. And, so once we caught up, it was, full steam ahead. And I don't think Mick gets enough credit. You can say things about myself or whatever, but really his leadership, his strength of character and everything to do what he did at the Bulldogs, I don't think gets enough credit. I can remember one time poor old Jimmy Edmund was just going, and anyway, Mick said, I'm going to drop him. And I said, do you want me to come in with you? He said, no. Anyway, you nearly felt the roof of the grandstand go off with Jimmy. Jimmy wasn't happy, but it was the best thing for a week or two, and he'd come back. So, as a young coach, he had the courage to make tough decisions as the captain of the club. And, Mick was great. And, he was real pro the way he sort of went about everything.
Oh, incredible. And, the ball kept rolling in 84 because, we came that close again, like 83 to the finals. And I guess, it was up to you to sort of say there's a couple of pieces to this puzzle we still have to put in place. Yep. And you went on an absolute surge, particularly in Western Australia, with Alan Daniels and Brad Hardy. I'd love to hear a little bit about those players, but also, your old mate Shark Phil Malin, you end up poaching from Carlton, and the little budgie from Essendon, so those four players, absolutely incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about how we needed them?
Well, I suppose Brad Hardy, we'd certainly sort of been doing a lot of work with, and I think Brad might have been on Geelong's. It was another club, I think.
It was Geelong. He'd been selected with the 1982 Form 4, so he's obviously been sitting on that for a couple of years. Yeah. So that shocked me of how he didn't end up coming to the Cats.
Yeah, well, that had run out, and so we'd sort of put a lot of work into Brad as well, and Shorty Daniels, played some good state footy, with and also played for Claremont, and got to know, as I said, Wally Maskell, the president, sort of recommended him, even though he was quite a fiery sort of character, old Shorty. But but Brad, played. I think he won the medal in the state game, playing against Victoria and all that. But he was a great asset. I mean, I know. Unfortunately, he and Mick don't probably see eye to eye, but there's no doubt that the way Mick coached him in '85 and allowed him to be that loose man, particularly at Whitten Oval, which the ground was sort of narrow. And Brad's probably one of the smartest players you ever want to come across, and knowledge of the game, reading it, just was outstanding for us. And Shorty, as I said, played some great footy on the wing, The funny part about Tony Bahaja, I was invited to, there was a farewell dinner in '84 with Ken Judge and Gary Folds, and I think there was one other, and our wives and that. And I said to Budgie, why are you going? You still got plenty of footy left. Oh, no, I'll probably need to settle down and, look after my career off the field. Anyway, I said, oh, look, next time I'm in Perth, I'll call in and have a chat, just say good day, because we got on pretty well because of Ken Judge and people that we sort of, Jim Sewell and all those guys that played at East Fremantle. Anyway, it was only about probably 3 or 4 weeks later, I was in Perth, trying to do a bit of recruiting. And I can remember ringing up, and there was no real mobile phone sort of in those days like it is now. I can remember Michelle, his wife, answered the phone. I said, look, is it all right if I call around and say good day, And she said, oh, no, Tony's, got an early start. He's got a milk run and things like that early. And anyway, she kept saying no. I said, look, I'll only come around, just for a quick coffee and all that. Anyway, she finally said yes. And I went around and, said, mate, why don't you come back and play at the Doggies? You got plenty of time, plenty of footy left in. Anyway, by the end of the night, he agreed, and Michelle agreed to come back, and he sort of added to us, for that year as well. And Shark Malin and Robert Klomp would, just help top us off. Phil Malin in that final was probably, one of the finals with Dougie Hawkins was probably nearly best on ground, to be honest. We certainly gave it a good shake. I watched that '85 Plim final, and I still think we're going to win until the end. And Brad Hardy did such a great job on Lee Matthews that day, and then I mean, champions are always going to come back at some stage, and Lee sort of turned it on a bit at the end. But some great recruits that come in at the time, and Tony McGuinness, another one as well. So who added to us and made us a lot better with Brian Raw. They were a great little combination.
Yeah, unbelievable. That 1985 one still gives me nightmares. And but what a campaign! Do you think if we had have gotten across the line, Dougie Hawkins keeps telling me we would have beaten Essendon. Do you think we were a chance to win that flag?
Oh, 100%. I know it's easy to talk about it in hindsight, but we certainly felt we could beat the Bombers. Like over the journey and all that, and what I'd heard about Essendon and Bulldogs, they were always used to beat. So we decided that practice matches for a couple of years, let's play games at Windy Hill, because we couldn't win there. And I remember one of the practice matches, we had a draw, and we actually walked away feeling pretty happy about ourselves. And this is a good turn, and we certainly then when we played them had a win at Windy Hill. So and one of the great games, I think in '85 we played Essendon at Whitten Oval or at Footscray. Magnificent day. Like you couldn't, I just forget what the crowd was, but you couldn't get another person in, and had a great win, one of the great wins. But 1985 in my 40 odd years of footy is one of the most special times, and that close. But I've never seen a room full of grown men in tears after a game, and they'd put so much work in, and Mick had done such a great job, turning the place around. It was sort of hard to cop that we're that close.
Yeah, unbelievable. I was a 9-year-old that year, and I fell in love with it with the club. We scored more goals that year than any other club year in our history.
Yeah.
So it was just a beautiful brand, and it was a one that'll loom large in everyone's memory. That's for sure.
One player we should mention who was great my time was Simon Beasley. I mean, I remember when Mick Malthouse coached us, the odd time if it was pouring rain, Mick would leave him out of the team. And poor old Simon had Saturday morning wake up, look out the window, hopefully and pray that it wasn't raining. So he would, but he was a great asset and still is with the Bulldogs.
So we moved to 1986. You picked up Tony McGuinness, who you mentioned.
Yeah.
He was tied to Geelong.
Yeah.
So you're able to get him and Murray Rance on board as well. Were there any players over the journey that you were that close to getting? Any almost recruits that come to mind that could have been Bulldogs?
I think probably one that inspired me to even make the club better, and he's become a great friend, Tony Elshaw. I remember ringing him up and said to him, my first early days at the Bulldogs, what about coming and playing at the Bulldogs? He said, you've got to be kidding. Well, I wouldn't go to the... Well, when I hung up, it made me that determined that I was, one player that I was disappointed we never... Or two players, actually, that we got one for a little while. John Riley, who from North Adelaide, we recruited, who was like a Bruce Stool in the Sandful, and he was a unbelievably smart young fella, nuclear physicist, I think he was. Anyway, we got him a job, and he played a couple of games for us, and anyway, North Adelaide, and that took us to court because they reckon he had a contract and all that, and we lost. So unfortunately, John had to go back, but he was one that would have made a big difference.
Wow.
But one player that I felt would have really helped us was Neil Craig. I tried to get Neil at Carlton, and when I was here, and then he didn't come. It's hard to get South Australians in those days in some ways. Anyway, when I went to the Bulldogs, I had another crack at him, and I can even remember I met him here, and we went for a run around Princes Park here, and he was an amazing athlete. And I think halfway around I said, mate, I'll catch you at the other end, because he was so damn quick and such a great runner. but he eventually didn't come. But he was one player that I felt, could have topped us off a bit more in '85 sort of thing. But they were probably, two players that would have, given us even a better chance than what we had. And, the Neil Cordies and, Brian Cordy's another one that, I remember Tony Cape saying to me, look, he's got dicey knees, don't offer him too much money. Well, you couldn't have got a better competitor or than Brian, and was just, number 49, I think he was, if I remember correctly. But the Cordy boys, they were great for the Bulldogs. So, but yeah, Craigie and John Riley would have certainly topped us up nicely.
Oh, love that. Yeah. Brian Cordy holds the record for the number 49 for the Dogs. No surprises there. But interestingly, Neil actually holds the record for most games played in the 29 and Zane Cordy in the number 12. So there's something about the Cordys. Yeah, brilliant. Love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So 1986 wasn't to be, was it? It sort of ended a bit unceremoniously, with particularly Brad Hardy. They had a bit of a stoush at the end. Were you in the box by any chance, the coach's box, when that sort of blew up with Mickey Malthouse?
I was, unfortunately, and I was only talking to someone about it the other day. And sometimes, you get a gut feel about things, and Mick. I don't think Brad chased, or I think it was Wayne Blackwell that he didn't chase. We were playing Carlton, and I can remember Mick said, so and so he's coming off, and I said, oh, gee, you just sort of get a little gut feel. Gee whiz, I don't know, and I've never interfered what coach has said, but I, certainly had a great rapport with Mick and could sort of at least speak, and he knew I wasn't trying to be a smarty. And I said, mate, I just don't know about this. Anyway, he said, nah, buggering. Anyway, come off. And unfortunately, Brad, waved the jumper, and half time, I must admit, it feels like a bit of a blur, because it was just, an experience that you don't want to sort of go through. And it was a pretty tense week that between the two of them, but which at the end of the day, I suppose, someone had to go, and Brad was the one that eventually, left, and I was lucky enough to get him up to the Bears.
Yeah. So there it is. So Brad Hardy, the Dogs' loss, I guess, was your gain. 1986 came, and there was an opportunity, I guess, that came up that you couldn't refuse. To start a list and a new franchise in Brisbane Bears. Was it hard leaving the Dogs, or was this just an opportunity to keep on growing?
No, it was hard to leave, and to be honest, and I don't think my wife will be upset. Like, probably the main reason that I left was that she wasn't well, and we probably needed a something to change a bit. And I can remember saying to her, "Look, I've been offered by both consortiums. What do you think?" And she said, "Well, I think it'd be good for us." That was probably the main reason. I probably wouldn't have left, if it wasn't for that situation. And that was really hard, sort of, talking to Mick and, Dougie Hawkins, all the boys. It was a pretty tough situation, but, it was something that I felt, I had to do personally. And, and also, I suppose, once I made the decision, an opportunity that no one else had really had to, start a team from scratch, and which was a pretty amazing sort of experience to go through. But even so, we, people forget the Bears. We won 6 games in our first year, which, gosh, a few years ago, Carlton had only won 2 or 3. So, and clubs had, like that. But yeah, to win 6 games, the next year we won 7, and the third 8. And it fell away a bit after that. But an amazing experience, and to sort of be involved with someone like Christopher Skase and people like that. It was heady times, those times up there. That's for sure.
Yeah, I heard you've had some lavish lunches with some expensive prawns. It's a podcast for another time.
Exactly.
And obviously you were allowed to take 2 players from each team at that point, and I guess you had some good relationships with at least 3 clubs. You netted Brad Hardy, who we've just mentioned, but you were able to take Rod McPherson as well. I think Jimmy Edmond, who'd left for the
Yep.
Swans, you reunited with. So there was, and then obviously Mickey McLean later on.
Yep.
So you were able to get, keep that Bulldog unity together.
It was interesting with Jimmy Edmond. It was, I remember, contract time. I offered him a figure, and which was probably it was the best we could do at the Bulldogs at the time, and it was still, nearly the highest paid player. And he said to me, I'll never forget. He said, "Oh, look, I've been offered 150 a year for 3 years from the Swans." And I said, "Jimmy, you got to take it. For back in those days, that's life changing sort of thing." And then when I went to left Bulldogs and went to the Bears, Jimmy rang me and said, "Oh, they're going to delist me, but they're going to pay me for the next 2 years."
Wow.
And he said, if you give me something, I'll come. And I think we offered him 20 grand or something like that. And he come along, and the Swans, had to keep paying him, which was unbelievable in those times. But so it was great to reunite, and Rod, he did a great job, but unfortunately, some injuries and things like that sort of made it a bit hard. But the both McPherson boys were good characters, and great to have around a footy club, that's for sure.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Well done to get Jimmy Edmond back. And I guess Dr. Jeffrey Edelson probably had a bit more cash than sense at times. So well done for Butch. Love it, love it. So, your time at Brisbane ended, and then I guess, you've spent decades at Carlton since. But am I understanding that there was a little window where your brother Gary was working at the Dogs? I ran into Luke Beveridge, and he said that he has recollections of a trade that involved Adrian Campbell and himself at Melbourne, and he was pretty convinced that you were part of that. I just wanted to check if that's true.
No, I wasn't involved with that. But he certainly, Adrian, I think one year he was our leading goal kicker at the Doggies, after I'd left. And young Adrian, I wasn't involved in that, but he probably, Luke might have been, perhaps Gary, my brother, might have been more involved in that than myself. So.
Yeah, must have been your brother then, and but the O'Sullivans have brought in a premiership champion and hero there. So so well done to your family there. Love it, love it. We're coming to the end of our time, Shane. But just in terms of the Bulldog Army, who are eternally grateful for your services and everything you've done, are there any messages that you'd like to give? And have you still got a soft spot for us? I know you're a Carlton man, but do you still harbour a love for the Doggies in any way?
Oh, absolutely. I joined pay the joining for fee every year for the past Bulldogs past players and officials. I've been to a few of their AGMs, the past players, and I was invited, before Christmas to go down. I think a lot of past players, once a month meet in the social club there and have a coffee, just sitting at the tables. I was at that, and Ross Abbey, who heads up the past players, is just an absolute gentleman, and we catch up, every now and again. So no, always check the scores. As I said, the 4 years there that I had was, just amazing. And, as I said, 1985 was pretty special. And, I said it before about what you saw the supporters like that year, 85, that was amazing to see how happy everyone was. But no, it's great. The facilities, Amit Baines, what they're doing there is outstanding. And, they're certainly got all the amenities and everything that all the other clubs have got. So the club should be very proud of where they are at the moment. And to win that premiership, it was there that day watching, and it was pretty special to see the joy that everyone got in that year. And fantastic. There was a little passage of play with Picken and Briggs and all these blokes, the hits and the ball bouncing around. It was it was just an amazing sort of game. But great for the Bulldogs, and still got a lot of good friends and catch up with Mick Malthouse and people like that quite often. So we always reminisce.
Well, you've got your fingerprint and your DNA, right over the club, I guess, and those threads that still, flow straight through the heart of our club. So, we're eternally grateful for everything you achieved. And I think we can safely say that Neil Cordy was right. You are the man that changed the course of
I'm
our
not
history.
sure about that. Thanks a lot, Matt. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your kind words.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you for everything. Ladies and gentlemen, Shane O'Sullivan.
Red in my heart, white in my veins, blue in one eye, red, white, and blue in my brain. I'm Bulldog born.